Welcome to the If I Had More Time podcast at Mariners Church. This podcast series invites you into a casual conversation with our senior pastor, Eric Geiger, and our teaching team to hear a few helpful insights and truths they wish they had time to include in the weekend message. Be sure that you have listened to this weekend's message prior to listening to the podcast so you get the most out of our current series. We hope you enjoy it.
Hey, welcome to the If I Had More Time podcast. Today it is just me because we have a special guest, a mentor of mine, an incredible leader, Craig Groeschel. He's the Senior Pastor of Life.Church and also an author of many books, including a book called Think Ahead, which is so important with what we talked about this weekend about being overwhelmed by the number of decisions in our lives. And I think that Craig just gives incredible insight in this book. So I want to use the book as a framework for what we talk about, and you can pick up a copy at our bookstore. You can obviously order it online as well. And before I start interviewing you, Craig, I just want to say thank you. Man, you've been so generous to our church. I mean, your ministry has impacted us so much. So many of the things that we do in terms of multiple congregations is because you've been available to me and helped me think through things, and I'm really, really thankful. People don't realize, but when they watch Mariners online, if they watch on YouTube, obviously Craig Groeschel didn't create YouTube, but our Mariners online platform is actually a platform that Craig and his team created. YouVersion Bible app, which a lot of people in our church use, also came out of the innovation that comes from Life.Church. And I know many of our church have listened to your leadership podcast. So obviously you're a pastor that a lot of people respect, I respect, and you've helped me a ton. But also leaders in the marketplace have learned to look to you because you hit the skill aspect of leadership, but more important, the heart of being a leader, of being a person, a man or woman of integrity, and I'm really thankful for that. Yeah. So, man, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you. It's a real honor, and as you know, Amy and I, we think the world of you and Kay. Just your friendship means so much, and you know we've been honored to visit the church and hear you preach, and I think that you've got one of the clearest gospel presentations of anybody today. Your mind for God-honoring leadership is really second to none. Your heart as a pastor, it's incredibly special. And nobody wants to hear us gush over each other for 10 minutes, so I'm not going to do that. But I just, you know, if I were in your part of the country and couldn't be a part of my church, I'd be on the front row every week serving God with you because your ministry is really, really, really special, and we're cheering you on, man. It's an honor to be a friend of yours.
Man, thank you. It means a ton. So I hit in the sermon that there's 35,000 decisions that people are confronted with every day, and that is the lead-in of your book, which you hit it's so insightful that leads to paralysis. It also can lead to a whole lot of regret. So unpack the weight of how many decisions people are making a day.
Well, you know, according to research, and it's still, you know, when I read that, I dug in a little deeper. Like, is that really true? Can it really be? But, you know, experts estimate we would make somewhere in the neighborhood of 35,000 decisions a day, which in some ways, Eric, that's good news because that gives us reason. Like, no wonder we're so exhausted all the time, right? No wonder we're overwhelmed. And it's so true. You think about, like, I've got 6 grown kids now, but they're all young adults, and they're all incredibly overwhelmed with, like, what are we going to do in life, and how are we ever going to make it, and how we're going to get afford a house, and they seem paralyzed. What's interesting is you would think with more options you would actually feel more freedom, but the reality is more options actually creates more stress. And you kind of know it if you're looking on Netflix with unlimited movies. It's hard to find one. If you get on a plane and there's only 8 choices, you pick 2 you want to watch because there's only 8 choices. And so in our culture today, I think people with all the options we have to take up our time, there's kind of different levels of stress. There's decision fatigue, like we're just tired of making decisions, and therefore at the end of the day, after making decisions all day at work, we come home and we may make a bad decision. There's decision paralysis, that there's so many options, we just don't know what to do. And so I try to tell young leaders or any leaders that, you know, that no decision is actually a decision. If you're not making anything, that is a decision of its own. And so in the book, what I really wanted to do is try to help readers and help people who are followers of Jesus look at some kind of scriptural skills to become better decision makers, both from a practical standpoint and then from a spiritual standpoint. If we recognize we don't always make great decisions, and what is our life? For the most part, our life is a result of the sum total of all the decisions that we make. We make our decisions, and our decisions tend to make us. So how can we better serve God with wise, God-honoring decision-makings? And that's really the heart behind the book.
Yeah. In fact, one of the best principles, I think, in the book, which I want our people to glean from, is the art of pre-deciding, which we see that in the marketplace at times. You know, some of the greatest tech founders, Steve Jobs wore the same turtleneck and jeans and, you know, tennis shoes because he wanted to free up his mind for not that decision. So he pre-decided as much as he could decide. And I think the whole figure out what you can pre-decide is a wise nugget of advice in your book.
Thank you. Yeah, so I like Jobs in doing that, and so, you know, I'm not brilliant like he is, and I don't have the weight of all the decisions that he did, but I've experimented with that as well. Just in that, for me, it would even be like picking out the clothes I'm going to wear the night before, and if I like a shirt, I'll buy 3 and wear it over and over again, and nobody in the office makes fun of me to my face. They might behind my back, but I don't really care, because on that surface level, as often as we can, eliminating any kind of repetitive decisions frees up our minds for better decision making. And that's kind of what I call level one. A deeper level would be to go ahead and look at, what do we believe in life? What are our values? What do we want to accomplish? And then, rather than making decisions that would point us in that direction whenever we face them in the future, when there's pressure, when we might be, you know, under a time deadline, or we might be tempted to do the wrong thing, what I want to do is try to put myself in, you know, what kind of situation am I going to be in? When I'm in that situation, I'm going to pre-decide today what I'm going to do at that point. And then whenever your values are clear, your decisions become easier. And so I would work, you know, and I know you're working with your church, let's determine what it is that we value, what God-honoring values are important to us. And then let's start with the end in mind and say, if we want to end up with this type of a marriage, we want our kids serving Jesus, what decisions will we make today that will help bring about those results in the future?
That's great. So in the book, you give this juxtaposition between the 35,000 decisions that we're confronted with every day, and then 7 big decisions, which if in the whole line of thinking about pre-deciding, if we can pre-decide on these 7 big decisions, then with our life being the sum total of our decisions, and our decisions actually then making who we are, these 7 decisions being really critical.
Yes.
And I'd love to spend a couple of moments talking about these. I think it's an amazing framework, which is why I wanted to have you on the If I Had More Time podcast, because I think if our people can think about, okay, I'm going to go ahead and pre-decide these 7 things, there's a whole lot of decisions that will already be made through the framework, through the lens of these 7.
Right. Well, we want to talk about, start with the first one if you want.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, in pre-deciding, this is, if there's anything in my life that's working, is generally, it's not accidental, right? Because by nature, I can be lazy. By nature, you know, my natural sinful nature wants to do what's easy, what's, you know, the shortcuts. And so I ask myself, if we were going to pick the big categories, what would be the most important? And being ready to battle off temptation, I think, is up at the top of the list of things as followers of Jesus we really want to be ready for. We know that we have an enemy. We know the enemy lies. We know the enemy tempts us. And we know that God always gives us a way out. So if there's a way out, what we want to do is decide early, where am I most vulnerable? And when I'm in that situation, how do I get out? So if I'm vulnerable to something, I may pre-decide to create distance between me and whatever area that I'm vulnerable. If I find myself too close to something that I wasn't planning on, then I'm going to pre-decide I might call somebody, or I might, you know, decide just to drop whatever it is and run. And the example I've used, you know, a lot of people are vulnerable maybe to look at the wrong thing with their eyes, or their thought life going the wrong way. For me, as a guy that, before I was a Christian, I had some exposure to pornography. And when I became a Christian and the internet became available, I was like, oh no, this stuff is in my home. What am I going to do? Well, I'm not going to wait until, I might be vulnerable in the future. I'm going to go ahead and pre-decide today to put that as far away from me as I can. So I've put some safeguards in my life, which is, there's a lot of them. From all of my internet activity is monitored, so I never have a vulnerable moment. My phone has real safeguards on it. I don't plan on looking at anything wrong, but if I ever were weak, there's a plan to keep me from doing it. And the way I say it, Eric, is this: why would I resist a temptation in the future if I have the power to eliminate it today? Why would I resist something in the future if I had the power to eliminate it today? So whatever area someone's weak, if they're tempted to overeat the wrong types of food, let's just not put that type of food in our house, or get it and lock it up and have a timer on the lock, or whatever it would be. If we're tempted to have road rage, let's pray before we get in the car, or decide to count to 10 before you go crazy. So it's just look at any area of your life you might be vulnerable, and ask yourself, when I'm in a situation, first of all, how can I stay out of a tempting situation? If I get in there, what's my game plan? And then we pre-decide. And it's been a game changer for people I work with, pastors, my kids. We all have kind of our own pre-decision lists of how to stay away from the things that would be dishonoring to God and hurtful to us.
That's huge. So pre-decision number one, I will be ready. And then move to number 2, I will be devoted. Which I'm assuming that really connects well, right? I'm ready now, and now I'm devoted to Christ and all things.
Absolutely. So one thing I've noticed about me is I never tend to drift toward holiness. Like I just, if I have no plan to seek God and no plan for Christian fellowship and no plan to get to know God's Word, I don't accidentally ever wake up and go, oh man, like I'm way closer to God today, and I just know His Word, and I'm living the fruits of the Spirit, and I'm not walking by the flesh, but I'm walking in the Spirit. That just doesn't happen accidentally. So what I want to do is, knowing my nature, I want to be very, very intentional. If devotion to God is a priority, then I know there's certain things in my life that are going to add to intimacy with God and add to spiritual strength, and resisting certain things are going to, keep me from drifting away. So in that chapter, what I try to do is I try to help the follower of Jesus to predetermine what are the things that are going to help you be devoted to your relationship with God. And what's really fun, Eric, is, in the early years, my 20s and 30s, I kind of thought it was almost the same for everybody. Like, Bible study and prayer and church, and those things are really important, and they're always important for all of us. But I would give people some freedom to think outside of, just those natural things. For example, really great Christian fellowship is super important, and more important for some people. Worshiping God, not just on, the few songs on Sunday at church, but maybe all throughout the week might be a big deal.
Yeah.
For some people, journaling or nature walks, or I know some people just like praying and dedicating a hard day of work to God helps them feel close to God. And so it's predetermining what are the things that help me to connect with God, and then let's put them in our lives. So for me, it's in the morning, it's daily time in the Word. And then I talk myself through kind of some scriptural confessions. It's just renewing my mind with God's Word. I have ongoing accountability. Our family, we go to church all the time. If we're on vacation, we go to church. Because we're people of God. We never say, are we going to go to church on Sunday? We pre-decided. Right. In fact, I would say to all the great people at Mariners Church, because you're followers of Jesus, you'll never wake up and say, hey, it's Saturday night. Are we going to go to church tonight? It's Sunday morning. We're going to go. No, you've pre-decided. We're people of God. We go to church. And so it's again, an exercise to ask yourself, what decisions can we make today that will help connect us intimately to the heart of God and to live in such a way that really honors Him?
Man, I love that. And I love the freedom on, obviously we know the spiritual disciplines of attending services and prayer and being in the Word, but even other things that stir your affections.
Yes.
For me, it's a mountain bike ride. Like a mountain bike ride, listening to some worship music, man, that is so good for my soul, and pre-deciding that rhythm into my life.
Yes, and making those things almost non-negotiable. Obviously, sometimes you have to give them up, but if if spending time in the Word is a daily commitment, it's a daily commitment. If for you, one bike ride a week in the mountains with worship in your head helps you to hear from God better, then I'd prioritize that. And that's not selfish. That's actually wise. That's saying,
that's great.
And for me, and this is just to drift a little bit, as a pastor, a dad, and a husband, I devoted so much of my life to serving others that I was almost always empty and had I just didn't give myself permission to enjoy anything. And I found like literally going out and doing some kind of physical activity with other guys can help recharge me, and I better connect with God. So it can be something even as weird as that just aligns your heart, clears out your mind, and we want to determine, based on how God has wired us, how do we best connect with Him and fill up so that we can give out. It's never fill up just so we can be selfish. But it's fill up so we can give out and love people and love God with all of our hearts.
Yeah, and I love the pre-deciding. There's things in our life that we always are going to brush our teeth. Like we brush our teeth in the morning. Like that's a pre-decision. But to elevate these spiritual disciplines or these rhythms in our life that cause us to really be more devoted to Jesus, to elevate those to that same level is just a game changer.
Yes.
All right, talk to us about then decision number 3. I will be faithful.
Well, here's what's interesting. Like if let's just say we're hanging out and we got some buddies of yours from the church, or we're in a small group with Mariners people, and I said, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do in life? Most of us, we typically drift towards things like, like for me, I'd say I want to do something that feels important. I want to do something that makes a big difference. And like the selfish side of me, kind of the sinful side, is always, if you looked at me, I'd want you to say, hey, Craig's kind of important. But when you look at Scripture, when we stand before Jesus one day, if we've lived a life that's honoring to God, He is not going to say, hey, Eric, welcome into my kingdom. Well done, my good and important servant. There is a word that He's going to say.
Yep.
And that word is faithful. And so when I looked at the Gospels, and I looked at what are the different times Jesus used the word faithful, all of a sudden it started to become real clear to me where I want to pre-decide. You look at Matthew 25, and it seems to me, when you look at the parable of the talents, that Jesus is ridiculous when you look at the strong words He used. If you multiply talents, well done, my good and faithful servant. If you waste them, you squander them, He said, you're not only lazy, but you're wicked. You're evil. He said, get away from me, you wicked servant, and cast you out into the realm of outer darkness. That's really strong words. And so if I'm going to be faithful, I'm going to look at the resources entrusted to me. What would that be? That would be my time. That would be the gifts that I have. That would be the money that God trusts me with, and I'm going to be faithful with those. So that means I want to multiply, maximize it all. I want to maximize my time. I want to maximize finances, and I want to be faithful. So if you take just the money end on pre-deciding, Amy and I pre-decided a long time ago kind of what would be a cap of what we're going to live off of. And then we're going to pre-decide percentages of not just, we start with a tithe, and then another tithe goes to here. And as we multiply resources and are blessed, we're going to predetermine where the resources go. More is not for us. Then we got to the place where it's like, okay, what if we want to get a luxury? And so we want to buy, and this is years into it, meaning like years of multiplying resource. But if we want to buy a nice car, well, what are we going to do? Then, we feel guilty about that. So we would just say, okay, if we're going to buy a car, give a car. So we'll buy one, and then we'll give and donate another one. And so it's not going through life with this half-hearted plan of make more, accumulate more.
Yeah.
But I want to pre-decide with my time, with my relationships, with my gifts, with my money, how can I be faithful? And so there are lots of areas of pre-deciding. And then we do kind of an annual retreat where we look at it all, our children, legacy, money. We don't always get it right, but we're always working on it. It's always it's a prayerful work. God, what does it mean for us to be faithful to you this season?
That's beautiful. And this annual retreat is you and Amy?
Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And our kids, and then we do a few days with the kids, and we talk about legacy, and we talk about everything from, like, in our family. My mentor said, you want to talk about spiritual legacy. You have to talk about spiritual legacy. You want to talk about parenting and kids. And you better talk financial legacy, because it's a part of, you got to have money to pay the bills, and it's a really important part of honoring God. So we do that without apology. And here's our financial plan, and here's what we're going to do for you all, and here's what we're going to do giving wise, and we want to be prayerful. Where else would you like to give? And so we try to incorporate them into that. Doesn't always go great. We got 7 grandkids that are running around, and sometimes some are paying attention. So don't visualize this like holy perfect retreat. Just know it's a very good attempt at creating direction and helping our kids and our grandkids do the same thing, of saying, if we're going to honor God, we won't do it accidentally. We got to, as often as we can, we're going to pre-decide and make decisions now for the future that will help us stay awesome. In a way that we're happy about.
Beautiful. So decision 4 is one that I hear some people think you don't decide to be an influencer. So decision 4 is I will be an influencer. Because some have said, if influence comes, it comes, but that it's not something you actually decide. But you're teaching here, no, let's decide to be an influencer. Yeah,
100%. In fact, I'd almost want to reclaim the true meaning behind influencer, because today we know what influencer means. It means you've got 500,000 YouTube subscribers, or you got the blue check mark on Instagram, and you're probably selling some line of clothing, or you've got your workout brand you're promoting or whatever and getting paid for it. And that's what people think of as an influencer. If you go back to, and now this shows kind of how old we are, but back in the old days when we were kids, an influencer was your 5th grade teacher, right? That was your junior high coach. It was a Sunday school teacher. It was your best friend's dad who spoke into your life, or one of your buddy's moms that took you under kind of her wing and brought you into the home and helped you grow. So what I want to do is really help people realize that every single person listening to this has influence. Everyone has influence. And I would even say it this way. What is leadership? Leadership is influence, and you have influence, so you're a leader wherever you are. You could be first day on the job somewhere, and you have the ability to lead horizontally. You have the ability to lead up. If you've got a spouse, you can lead into your marriage. If you've got children, you are a leader. You've got friends. If you're a follower of Jesus, you better see yourself as a leader. You're light, and you're salt, and those things should shine. So what I want to do on that is really try to help people wake up and think, if today is a gift from God, how am I going to influence people? It doesn't mean you have to do a post. It can mean you're praying for somebody. That's influential. You're listening to somebody. One thing you're so good at is listening. You ask questions, you listen, and you will influence me because you create an intimacy in relationships. So how can I make a difference in the lives of people today? And one of my favorite stories in Scripture is the woman at the well that was living a life that was not something that most people would consider exemplary. And Jesus, goes and shares basically the love of the kingdom with her. And this woman goes back, and immediately, what does she do? She just starts telling people, "Hey, come and meet this guy. Come and could this be the one?" And the first thing she does after experiencing living water is she's influencing others and telling them, "You got to drink what I drank," and that shows you don't have to be ready, you don't have to be incredibly mature, you just have to be available, and you can pre-decide today wherever you are. When you walk in the room, hope walks in the room. When you walk in the room, the gospel's walking in with you, and you're going to make a difference in people's lives.
Love it. Well, I want to skip down to the last one, to a finisher, and encourage everybody to get the book and read 5 and 6, which is I Will Be Generous and Consistent. But decision number 7, and the reason I want to jump here is because, man, Craig, I mean, we've seen in what we do professionally in terms of being a pastor, I just long to be a finisher, because it feels as if the body bags of people who currently aren't finishing is just so tragic and heartbreaking, So pre-deciding now to finish, to be a finisher, anytime I see someone write on that or speak on that, I want to pay attention, because I so badly want, for the sake of my family, for the sake of the people I shepherd, I want to finish well.
Well, you will. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. Like, just anyone who spends, half an hour with you up close is going to see you're genuinely humble, and if you're humble, you're going to be teachable, and you have a real hunger to please the Father, and you're in His Word, and you've got real accountability around you. You've got a really strong team, but you're not a dominant leader. You're one that sits at a table and allows people to lead with you. And so there's no doubt in my mind that you're going to finish, but you're not going to finish because you're talented. You're not going to finish because you're smart. You're going to finish because you've planned to put the right things in your life to finish. And I think I don't want to chase too much of a rabbit, but man, couple of books I read recently, one on anxiety and then one on just kind of how we're hurting our kids in culture. I feel like culturally we are working against resilience in the lives of our children, young adults, all ages. And we know a lot of the contributing factors to mental health issues would be everything from the prevalence of the cell phone, social media comparing, lack of risk-taking, lack of fun play, and all those things. And so I feel like I am working today, three decades into ministry. I feel like people are more frail, more fragile, more broken, less confident, more fearful, more anxious, more depressed, more mental health issues. And so we really need to work. How are we going to finish? What do we need to put in our lives that will help us stay the course? And one would be just the desire, like you said. I mean, we got to choose now, and nobody's taking me out. I'm going to stay the course, and then we have to put the things in our place. And like for the last couple summers, we've tried to, we've flown out and seen you guys a couple times. We try to get together because you're the type of person that when I get with, is stabilizing. It's strengthening. We sharpen each other. You've got to have the relationships around, and so. How do you determine your why? Your why is going to keep you going. Your why has got to be crystal clear. If you don't know why you started, you'll be tempted to quit. We got to keep our why out there. We got to keep the right people with us. And then in our line of work, and a lot of people too, we got to stay on the tracks. Meaning, if we got to keep from getting into trouble in the wrong places. And so, again, each person's going to have to go through in their own life and say, what are the contributing factors? But I'm going to pre-decide this is who I interact with, this is how I think, this is where I go, this is where I don't go. And if we put those safeguards in place, then I believe we can be ready, devoted, faithful, be influential, be generous, consistent, and finish the work that God called us to do. And that's when life gets really special.
Amen. Well, man, this time has been incredibly helpful and insightful, like I knew it would be. I want to encourage everyone who's listening to pick up Think Ahead by Craig Groeschel. And man, I'm so thankful for the investment in me and the investment in our people. Thanks for giving us the time today, Craig.
Hey, Becca, I love you a bunch, man. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
We're so glad you tuned in to listen to the If I Had More Time podcast today. If you're interested in purchasing Craig's book, Think Ahead, you can check out the links in the show notes, or you can visit the Mariners bookstore. We hope you guys enjoy it, and tune in next week.